Okay. So the first thing I'll ask is, so we had an assignment due. Does anybody have any questions, or is anybody curious about anything to do with the assignment? There were a few people that had, let's just call them minor challenges, and they worked through them um, for the most part. But I don't know, maybe there were some of you that didn't contact me. I don't know.
Um,
Who's
I
speaking? Morgan?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Uh, go.
For two of the questions, I rounded out the number, and so it's made it wrong on the like quiz.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good thing that you mentioned that. So hold on just a minute. I'm gonna pause for a second, and I'm gonna pull up the site so we take a look at this together, okay? Um,
Okay.
okay. Okay. So under the My Grades link, if you click details, um, again, you see I'm clicking the details, then it'll have the student answer and the correct answer. So can you see that, Morgan?
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure, like, are you saying that for like your answer, like, do you see the one that's the correct answer here that's
Yeah, that's what I did. Like I rounded it.
but you see it's like 34.1999996, and this one is 34.2. The, you notice this, well, I don't know. Let's see here. Let's go back here. It says to correct, right?
Hmm.
So here you can see that the rounding didn't affect the answer, right? So 34.2 is close enough to 34.19, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying yours wasn't close enough, and I guess so it didn't, because here there are only two answers and they're both right. This is just an example. Um, I did it for my daughter, so Emma. But so you're saying that yours didn't? I mean, it wasn't close enough.
Um, it was 1/10. Well, not 1/10, but it was like 35.2 because instead of using their method, I rounded all the numbers up.
Yeah. So that's why, this is like our first like practice assignment, and just so you know, Ignithium, it's like dollars and cents, like $34.19 is within 1 penny of $34.20 in my
Hmm.
example here. So it'll give you a penny in either direction. If this had been 34.18, Ignithium would have still scored it correctly, right? And so what I told you guys, um, at the beginning was that, like, the rounding error is what the rounding error is, and you guys kind of got to get used to it because it needs to be like within a penny, because we work with dollars and cents, and every penny matters. And it's probably going to take a little bit of getting used to, but it's been, I've used this system, I don't know, for a couple different classes, and people get used to it after a while, so it'll take a little bit of getting used to. And like I said before, this is probably like impossible to imagine. What's your major, Morgan?
I'm a business major.
Okay, so maybe it's actually good for you because you care about dollars and cents too. Um, but like I have a colleague of mine that's a money manager, and they make a lot of money. But a lot of what money managers do is they'll trade currencies. And so you might not know this, but like for example, there's an exchange rate between the Japanese yen and U.S. currency on an exchange in Japan. They also have a currency exchange that changes yen for dollars in Europe. And they'll trade if there's even like to the sixth or the seventh decimal place a difference between the value in Japan versus the value in Europe, they'll trade billions of dollars so that they make a tiny bit on every transaction. Um, and it's practically a riskless trade. So precision does matter. That being said, the only other thing that I can tell you that will maybe make you feel a little bit better is that at the end of the class, not right now, but at the end of the class, I have the ability when I collect all the data to adjust the rounding error, um, and make it a little bit broader, right? So the precision right now is, it's tight. It's down to the single penny. But when I download the data at the very end, I broaden it a little bit. So let's just say, like within a couple pennies. So if your answer is really close and the system ends up counting it as being incorrect, if it's really close, you can bank on, I'm going to correct for that later. In your case, I honestly don't know, um, because I don't know, if you rounded this one and you rounded that one, then you rounded the other one, how much the rounding errors compounded, if you would be in, the range when I correct for it. But I can tell you this, that if it's really close, I'll I'll it'll be taken care of when I download the data at the end. So that's kind of like the best I can tell you is try to get used to the rounding error, and if you're really close, not a super great answer. But
Hello, Professor.
who's speaking now?
This is Benjamin Rose.
Okay, hey Ben, how's it going?
So, it's going really good. This is a really short question. I just wondering, when you finish the homework and you submit all your answers, is there like a submit, like
No,
some
no,
thing?
no. Actually, so, and I'll show you again a little bit. So, can you see we're on the main page and I go to homework, and then
Yeah,
I'm going to go to the math assignment. So, as soon as I put something in here, and I'd already responded to these couple of questions,
yeah,
like, what is the vertical intercept of equation to? So, the right answer would be 19, and I submit it, and I get that feedback.
yeah.
That's what's in the database, and
Sweet.
it scored it against that particular problem. Now, if I answer it again, it'll still say feedback, but that's not scored.
Okay,
You know,
sounds good.
and if you refresh the page, you can always go back up to the My Grades, and I encourage students to do this and check the details, and then you can see, because you don't have to answer them in order. But you can be like, oh, I already answered questions 1, 2, and 3 on assignment 1, and they've already been scored. Because like you might log in and log out and come back. You don't have to do it all at the same time. You just have to do it before the deadline. So then I could go back and say like, oh, okay, I'll finish that homework. And because every time it loads, it's getting different numbers, right? It doesn't know that you already answered. It wouldn't make sense for it to display an answer to a problem that wasn't that problem, right? So, the system knows you answered these and you don't have to answer them again. You just have to start at number 4. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. I'm all
Uh,
good now. I finished it, so I just
yeah,
wanted to.
yeah, and like I said, the best way to keep track, like, some students will write down, okay, question assignment 1, I answered question 1 or whatever. But you can always just go under My Grades and check in the details, and you can see which ones you've answered.
All
And
right.
um, yeah, so, and like I said, I call them homework quizzes, and that might cause a little bit of confusion, but I just want to emphasize to everybody that if you want to practice, the exact same questions are available under practice, and you could practice all day long, and it'll just note that you did practice in the database, but you're not scored. So once you're comfortable and you've practiced, then go ahead and go to the assignment, and you get one shot. The once you're doing the actual assignment, the time for practice is over. So this is one shot. The first thing you submit there is what you're going to be scored against. Anyway, so I've said that, but I'll say it probably a couple more times just to make sure that everybody's on board.
No, I got the hang of it now. It
Okay.
makes sense to me, so I'm all good now.
Okay, sweet. So is there anybody else that has a question about any of the stuff that's happening here?
I also have a question. This is Beverly.
Oh, hey, hi Beverly, how's it going?
Okay, I'm doing well, thanks. So when we go to Ignithium and we check under my grades,
Okay.
it shows the homework number correct, and number possible.
Yeah. Oh,
But
because it's 14 instead of 10.
yeah.
I only score it out of 10. So
Oh, okay.
so I don't give. Okay, there are no bonus points in the class, right? But the first assignment, I give you 14 and I score it out of 10 because of like the thing that Morgan was talking about earlier. I know that for the first assignment, you guys are just kind of getting oriented. And, so I give you like 4 extra ones. So Morgan, maybe that'll make you feel even better. You don't, if you got, 11 or 12 right, you got 100% on the assignment, right? So, but all the other ones you'll see that we have, they're going to be, I think all of them have 10 questions. And in the whole class, I think there are a total of 214 questions. And all of the homework assignments have 10 questions, I think, and they're scored out of 10. So this is the only place to have any like bonus points on the assignment. So anyway, that makes sense, Beverly?
Yeah, all clear. Thank you very much.
Sure. Does that make you feel any better, Morgan? I don't know.
Yeah, so I gotta have to reset now.
Okay, yeah, but just remember, you want to pay attention to that rounding error because this is your only opportunity to do that. Okay, so I'll ask one last time. Any questions? Going once, going twice. I have the chat open on my screen now.
Professor, I have a question. This is
Okay. Hey Aldo, how's it going?
Good, thank you. Do the grades pop up as soon as you do the questions?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it takes, a few seconds. I don't know how long, literally, but you saw like I was working on that one homework
You just
problem.
have to refresh the page.
Yeah, and then I clicked my grades and there was like a page refresh or whatever, and then it was there. See?
Okay, because I
It's
just
pretty
logged
quick.
into Ignithium,
Yeah.
and it still doesn't show any of the grades.
Well, in your case, so maybe like at well, I'll try to spend just a minute on it. So you're logged in, you're subscribed, you can see all of the like because there's practice and then the homework, so you can see the homework, right?
Yeah.
And you submitted an answer like for question number 1. And you got like the feedback. So like here, I'll put like, so it's 10900. I hit submit and it says feedback and it shows me a calculator. By the way, one of the reasons why it's showing you the calculator, and you guys could do this if you want to, is I'm hitting copy and paste and equal from that formula. This is the calculation that they're doing to score you. Does that make sense, Aldo?
Yeah, it does.
So is all of this working for you the way that it's working right now?
Yes, it is.
And then when you go to, I mean, like I'll show you, let's do another one and I'll just put in a random answer. So question number 4, I didn't answer yet. You saw I had questions 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yes.
And so the vertical intercept here would be 113, but you know, I could look it up on the graph. It's there. It's 113. But I'm not going to. I'll put in the wrong answer. 115. Submit, and I can see up. I got the wrong answer. Now I go back to my grades, and it's still I have 3 out of 10 because I didn't get that one right, and 115, 113. So, and you're saying it doesn't do that for you?
No, for mine, it doesn't show up any grades.
Well, you know, um, so maybe what you and I have to do, and I assume you're using like a regular browser. So if you're using, you know, Firefox or Chrome, or you know, in this case, I'm using Safari. Um, you know, the only thing that I can think of is that, you know, if you're using Internet Explorer, I don't know if anybody else has had, you know, been using Internet Explorer, but like that's kind of a bad browser for lots of different websites. Um, but but what I don't know if you have the ability to share your screen. Are you on the site right now?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you wanna share your screen? I don't. Let me see if I can let you
Yeah.
share it. Um, um, I'll go. I'm gonna make you a co-host. Okay, so share your screen. Because you're the only one that's reported this issue. So, so something's going on weird with your situation. Are you are you able to share?
Should-
There's like a little button that says share screen,
Yeah.
and then you should be able to choose
Okay.
your browser window.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this.
Okay. So go to the home screen first. Okay. And then I'm just making sure. So click on account, and it should say, okay, you're subscribed. Okay. So then go back, and then go to homework down at the bottom. Continue. And then click on take now, and everything shows up. And then, you know, right, number one would be 9,500. Hit submit. Okay. So then let's go back up and take a look like I did under my grades. Oh,
Okay, now it's working.
details. Okay. So can you explain that? Anyway, you know
Is it-
what? It's not a super, don't stress. This is the first assignment, and it's designed to be a review so that people can work out the bugs of dealing with the system. But
Alright.
going forward, you know, there are points that you will miss. So hopefully you got it
'Cause-
straightened out.
Yeah, because yesterday I did all of it and I hit submit on each one, and then I went back to it after like refreshing the page, and nothing was on my
Well, I
grades
just want to
page.
be clear about one thing. So if you go back to homework, you want to go, you can go to
Yeah.
home and then go to homework. Okay. Then go to the math one, and then hit the page refresh, and you'll see all the questions will change, right? And then hit it again, page refresh, all the questions will change. That's actually kind of useful because if you don't like a question and you haven't answered it, you can go get a new version. And later on in the class, that's a really useful strategy because some of the questions that are random are easier to answer than the others. It's not because the questions themselves are easier, it's because some of the graphs are easier to see than others. Because remember, all of these things, if you go down to the graphs, right, you can you can pick out the points on the graphs and it'll give you the label. And even though it has the equations, you don't need to be able to work with the equations. You can just read it off of the graph as long as you know like a vertical intercept is the point, over against the vertical axis, that kind of thing. You can just read it off. But I mean, there might be something like questions 1 or 2 where you have to do a little calculation, but you're not going to be having to do any sophisticated algebra. But the thing I was going to tell you is that if you leave the system idle, then what you should do is go refresh the page first or log out and log back in, because like all of the systems, because these are all password protected systems, they log people out after 90 minutes. So I don't know if you were idle or if you like looked at certain versions of the questions and then were like, oh, well, I'm going to go back and like I'm going to figure out how to do these. Then I'll come back and answer them. And maybe you were gone for a long time. But guess what? It's you. I mean, like that's why I say it's kind of like a quiz. If you want to practice, then go to the practice page and then practice those. But when you come to the actual like homework/homework quiz, you gotta like do it. And if I mean, it gives you some idle time. I imagine if you were idle for, only like an hour, you probably wouldn't have any trouble. But it's a bad strategy. I mean, you should when you log in to do the homework, you should be ready to do the homework. You know what I mean? Like you're just gonna work on it, and if you have to stop in the middle, then just log out and then log back in when you're ready to come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. So
Sir, I have a question.
yeah. Hold on. So Aldo, I must want to take Aldo off as the co-host. I just have to figure out how to do it. You are my first co-host, Aldo, just so you know. So, okay. So now it's back to me. Okay. So there was another question.
Yeah, I just realized that I use my normal email for the sign up. Is there a problem with that?
Well, yes, because I asked you not to do that.
I know how it actually happens.
Yeah, because, so shame, shame, shame. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to remind me. So the system didn't bar you from doing that, but you need to send me an email with the email address and write your proper Cal Poly email next to it, just so I remember. And then as we go through the semester towards the end, you're going to have to remind me, because when I get all of the information, I have email addresses, and that way I can associate them with the person's score.
Okay.
So if you use a non-Cal Poly email address and it's like Pokemon2356, I don't know who that is. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'll
So
send an email. It's
yeah.
pretty similar. It's pretty similar. So
Yeah, but I should also tell you, I don't know. I mean, like a lot of people disregard this. I don't know if you're a little bit of like rebel or what, but for everything with school, you should always use your CPP address. I mean, I know it's kind of a pain sometimes, but if nobody's ever told you that, it's just a good practice.
yeah, you're right. I don't know why I just randomly just went to my other.
Hey, listen, stuff happens.
Yeah.
I'm not stressed about it, but the reason why I tell everybody to use their CPP address is because just imagine if it was everybody in the class of 72 that had random email addresses, and I'm trying to figure out how to assign grades at the end. It's just like impossible.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, if there's only a few people did it, and I actually noticed that I didn't notice it was you, but there were a couple of people, and I mean like I think 3 people in the whole class that did that, and everybody should do what you're doing right now. Make sure they let me know what's going on. So thanks. And don't do it again. So okay. So any other last final questions about Ignitium? Okay. So seeing that there are no further questions, I'll go ahead and I'll continue on with our lecture from where we were last time. Okay. And
Oh,
okay.
sir.
Yep. Yep.
Lawrence.
Okay, Lawrence.
Oh, so on Ignitium, just really quick. This is gonna be really quick. On Ignitium, it doesn't say like when is it due, when the homework due.
Yeah. Well. Um, you can't see this. Okay. But when I download the information, it gives me a date and a timestamp, right?
Oh, it does.
Yeah, when you submitted. So I know if you submitted after the time I told you that it was going to be due. So um, that's the way that I have it set up. Um, so you have to pay attention to the stuff that I put in Blackboard. And I'm like, hey, listen, this assignment's available through such and such date. You need to, submit your stuff on time. Okay.
Oh, all right. So when
Okay.
is the second? Oh, so you already posted on. All right.
No, I did not post the second assignment on Blackboard yet, but I will soon.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So okay, let's see. And, um, okay. Okay. So everybody should be able to see the PowerPoint now, hopefully. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good. And so where were we last time? So we'd gotten through the demand stuff, and I think this is about where we were last time. So we were talking about shifts, and so again, I had reminded you that it's a best practice, right? To think of things either shifting to the right or to the left as being either an increase in demand or a decrease in demand. And then we talked a little bit about normal and inferior goods, and the important point there is that for normal good, when you increase a consumer's income, then the consumer will purchase more of the good. So there's going to be an increase in demand, and if you decrease a consumer's income, then they'll purchase less of the goods. So there'll be a decrease or a shift to the left of demand. Inferior goods are different, and we talked a little bit about how you can have goods like the small sizes at the dollar store and generic goods where if a consumer's income increases, they don't purchase more of those goods, and instead it decreases the demand for those inferior goods. So and if again you pay attention to questions and things like that on Ignitium, then you'll see there are examples where there's an increase in income, and you have to figure out, is this a normal good or is it an inferior good? So pay attention. I would recommend that you have a couple of handy examples of what inferior goods are, and again the ones that most commonly are discussed are just generic goods in general. And a lot of times people talk about bus tickets as being an inferior good. So does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So those are the examples for the graphs, and we talked about those. Okay. So I think this is where we stopped last time, and something else. And you have to really think about this. Goods are substitutes for one another. So, and we talked a little bit about, sometimes the relationship is counterintuitive. It's something you wouldn't expect. Like we talked about chicken and airplane tickets as being compliments. Normally, there's some sort of rationale for that, like we talked about the in-flight meal example. But when you're doing these types of problems, you want to make sure that you understand I'm talking about the demand for this good. So it's, the good in question. So I'm talking about the demand for, let's talk about two substitutes. I don't know. I have an example of substitutes. I have a certain people that I know whose palate for beer is very um, undiscriminating, which means they're not drinking the beer because they like the taste of the beer. They're drinking the beer because of the effect the beer will have on them. And for them, the best beer is just the cheapest beer that they can get. So you might think about, yeah, a couple of beers like, PBR or Miller Lite or gosh, to name bad beers is hard for me because I don't drink, you know, um, beer based on the volume that I can afford. I am a discriminating beer drinker. I only, drink good beers. So so yeah, let's see. So Miller Lite is one of them. Can anybody else think of another cheap beer? Keystone. That's the one I was thinking about. So if we're talking about, the demand for Keystone, right? Um, then if you have a change in the price of something else that is a cheap beer, right, which is just a substitute. And one of the ways to think about it is if you're buying only on the basis of price, right? So if there's a sale on Miller Lite, the price of Miller Lite goes down. How's that going to affect the demand for Keystone beer? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? If people are just buying those beers on the basis of price alone, then it's going to decrease the demand for Keystone, right? Because there are more of those consumers that were purchasing Keystone, but then once the Miller Lite went on sale, they started purchasing Miller Lite instead. So um, that goes in line with our definition. So a fall in the price of one of the goods, so a fall in the price of Miller Lite is going to cause um, um, a reduction in the demand for the other good. And that's because people are switching or substituting to that other good that had the decrease in price. Likewise, if there's an increase in the price for Miller Lite, then that's going to cause an increase in the demand for Keystone because people are going to stop purchasing Miller Lite and they're going to go purchase Keystone, other things being equal. So yeah, it's important when you're answering these types of questions to keep track of, oh, I'm talking about the demand for this particular good, and then I'm talking about changes in the prices of these other goods that are substitutes and how that's going to affect the demand for this good in question. So if you're kind of concrete about it, you won't have trouble understanding the relationship. But if you're not concrete, it could if you try to just reduce it to a rule, the rule doesn't read very well, right? Because it's just like the fall in the price of one of the goods reduces the demand for the other, and you're trying to answer a question. So it's like, okay, decrease in the price of which one, fall in the price of which one. So just make sure you know which is the good whose demand you're trying to figure out if it's shifting or not. And then the other good, it's a substitute. And for complements, we already talked about that. Again, complements are things like my favorite example is chips and salsa, because I generally don't eat chips without salsa, and I don't eat salsa without chips. So they're complements. They're a package that I'm trying to buy together. By the way, I'll ask anybody, does anybody have a favorite salsa that they purchase? Because I have my favorite salsa. Anybody?
Yeah, I have a favorite salsa.
Okay, what's your favorite? Is this Emmett?
Yes, this is Emmett.
Okay, tell me, Emmett, what's your favorite salsa?
One of my favorite salsas is the double roasted salsa at Trader Joe's.
Okay, very nice. I haven't tried that one.
It's very
So,
good, very good.
yeah. My wife makes some homemade salsa and that's good. But if I have to like grab something off the shelf, it's Herdez medium. And it's okay if I get in the can too. But I'll generally buy a bottle of Herdez. But Herdez is like my go-to salsa. I don't like things that are too much like ketchup, they're too sweet.
Yeah.
But I'll try the Trader Joe's um, next time I go down there. So the point is, since you're trying to purchase the package, it's pretty obvious. Like for me, I know that if I see that chips are on sale, right? Price of chips have gone down. I'm gonna run to the salsa aisle and I'm gonna pick up some Herdez. So if you get a decrease in the price of one of the goods and that actually increases the demand for the other one, then that's what it means for the goods to be complements. So and here's a quick summary of the relationships that we've discussed so far. And again, this is not comprehensive. This is, principles of economics class to get you guys thinking about demand curve shifting. But but a quick summary is that if there's a change in the price of the good itself, that's just going to be a movement along the demand curve. So it's not going to shift the demand curve at all. But if you've got a change in income, you're going to shift the demand curve. If there's a change in the price of a related good, a substitute or a complement, that's going to shift the demand curve. If the taste of the good, and we talked a little bit about parachute pants in 1991, right? If something's a fad, then that's going to affect the demand. And we talked about expectations over what's going to happen in the future and the number of buyers in the market. So we have a sort of similar analysis for supply. And the first thing that you want to do is understand that supply is a relationship. And I like saying there are relationships because it gets people to not focus so much on the graphs for a minute and what the graphs represent instead. And we all know that relationships can be complicated. So I like it for that reason too. But so if we look at a single point on a supply curve or on that supply relationship, then it's going to be the quantity supplied, and that's the amount that sellers are willing and able to sell at a particular price. And the relationship for supply is governed by this thing we call the law of supply. And the law of supply just says that other things being equal, and when you see economists say that other things being equal, what they're talking about is the things that would shift the relationship being held constant, right? So the law of supply says that other things being equal, the quantity of goods supplied is going to increase when there's an increase in the price of the good. And actually, it turns out that this is a much more difficult relationship to explain than the one based on consumer behavior for demand. Demand is very intuitive, and you can think to yourself, oh, yeah, of course, if the price goes down, I'm going to buy more of the good. But it's not clear, and the intuition doesn't work as well when you're talking about a business and you say, oh, if the price of the good increases, other things being equal, that the business will expand the amount they supply. Now, it might sound intuitive, initially, and I wouldn't discourage you guys from thinking about it that way. But just realize that businesses are driven by the profit motive, and it's not always clear that changes in their costs from increasing the production might not, under some circumstances, mean that even though the price goes up, that they want to expand production. So just think about a factory that has a limited capacity and they're already supplying at their capacity, and there's a small increase in the price of the good that they sell on the market. But that price increase might not be enough to facilitate expansion of their business, like, buy new machines, expand the footprint of their factory and things like that. So yeah, it's not as clear why or what's the underlying set of assumptions that explains the law of supply. So again, if it makes sense to you, it sounds intuitive, that's fine, run with it. But just put a little, asterisk in your mind that we've got a lot more left to say about it before we're finished with the law of supply. And that won't actually come until like the second half of the class. So stand by. So just like the demand relationship, the supply relationship can be represented in a bunch of different ways. Mostly what we're going to do in this class is we're going to use the graphical representations. That's what you're going to be responsible for almost exclusively on Ignithium. But you should know that when you have a supply graph, a supply curve that you're graphing, what you're really doing, right, is you're just plotting the points that are associated with information that's on what we would call the supply schedule. So the supply schedule is just this table, and it tells you in one column what different prices the seller might face, and under those particular prices, what quantity of the good that they would be willing to supply. So, you can see here, for example, at a price of $2 per ice cream cone, the seller would be willing to sell 3 ice cream cones. Now, it's sort of important. Notice that it's kind of like the demand curve in the sense that it's like a wish list, right? We don't ever know that the seller will actually face a price of $2 and actually supply a quantity of 3 ice cream cones. So it's about what would happen if that situation ever actually occurred. Only one particular price is going to be showing up in the market at any particular time. So that's what we're going to observe. So the supply curve is a graph of the relationship. As we mentioned, here the relationship is plotted. And again, you've got quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. And you can see that because of the law of supply, the quantity of the goods supplied and the price go together. So you have an upward sloping relationship. Okay. And market supply, remember we have individual supply, individual demand and market demand, which aggregates the information from the individual consumers. Likewise, with supply, we have the individual suppliers' decisions to sell, and those are aggregated into this market supply. And so again, we'll use the language that these things are being summed horizontally, which means at any particular price, you're adding up the quantities of all the particular sellers in the market to get the final quantity that will be supplied by the market at a particular price. Okay, so just like demand, we have things that can shift the supply relationship. And here are a few that are mentioned. The biggest one is input prices. And so we'll talk about input prices, but also changes in technology and expectations and the number of sellers. The number of sellers is kind of pretty obvious because if you're just having an expansion in the number of sellers, like for example, again, we're looking at long-term supply as the population increases and the number of sellers naturally increases for something like fast food hamburgers. Well, you're going to just have a bigger quantity because you just have more sellers to add up for the market. But the input price one is probably the biggest one. So we'll talk about that. in a minute. Again, like with demand, for supply, you want to make sure you differentiate between supply itself, which is that whole relationship along the supply curve, that whole wish list of different prices and different quantities supplied, and a single quantity associated with a single price. That's probably, again, the error that's most common when people are first introduced to this material. They think, they can use, well, 4 units are supplied, or the supply is 4 units. Well, that second, bit of language, the supply is 4 units, really doesn't make sense in the way that we use the language in economics. What you want to say is the quantity supplied would be 4 units. So here's an example of movement along from one point to another on the supply curve. You go from point A to point C as the price increases from $1 to $3, and the quantity supplied goes from 1 unit to 5 units. So changing the price of the good itself just causes this movement along different points on the same supply curve. But then you can get these shifts, and again, the shifts can either be to the left or to the right. A leftward shift is a decrease in supply. A rightward shift is an increase in supply. And this is actually where the left and the right become really important, because you'll notice, and I'll take a volunteer for this. Okay, so who wants to chat for a minute? Anybody? We have any volunteers? Okay, so let me, okay. How about you, Christopher? You have your camera on, so you're looking pro-social today. Do you have your mic? Okay.
So hold on. What was the question again?
Well, I just said, do you want to chat? And you're like, well, maybe not.
Sure. I mean, I just woke up, made breakfast, and hold on. Yeah, made breakfast, and just oh shit, I'm a little bit late. So, okay, yeah, it's my dog.
Okay.
Let my dog in, but yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. So notice what I was saying. So if you have a decrease in supply, are you still there? Are you still with me, Christopher? Uh-oh. Christopher dropped off, it looks like. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Like, yeah, my computer's weird. I have to have something under it, otherwise my driver disconnects.
Okay. Okay, understood. So can you see the graph that I'm looking at? The shift in supply?
Yes, the supply. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So notice that the decrease in supply going from the blue to the red curve that's labeled S3, and I'll kind of highlight that there. That's a decrease in supply, and it looks like the blue curve is being shifted to the left, right? And you agree? That's a leftward shift.
Because people like ice cream, so the less ice cream you have, the more expensive it's going to get.
Well, actually, I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm just asking for an observation that we can agree going from S1 to S3 is a leftward shift. It's to the left. Okay, cool. Can you think of another way of describing it? So one way is saying, okay, look at a particular price. The quantity on the blue curve is to the right of the quantity on the red curve. So the quantity on the red curve is to the left of the one on the blue curve. That's one way of describing it, right?
It seems to be going at, like, you can actually make this into a function the way it's swing down like this.
Go disconnected for a minute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So it's to the left, but Can you see, is there something else we could say if we were going to say to the left? What would we say? Okay, and I'll give you one more second and then I'll help you out. How about this? Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Which way is my cursor moving?
Oh, it's moving. It's increasing. It's moving up.
Yeah, it's moving up. So that's kind of weird if you think about the language, right? So the correct way or the conventional way is to say that supply decreased and that's a shift to the left. But if you weren't careful, you would say, oh, well, the supply curve shifted up, right? And isn't it kind of weird to think of up as being a decrease? It's just a question. I think it is. You know, normally I think of up as being an increase. But here the curve is in some sense shifting up, but that's a decrease. And I think that that's just kind of a hard thing the language to wrap your mind around. You see what I'm saying?
I think in terms of supply and demand, it makes sense because if you take away the amount of something and people still want it, the price is going to go up because you need to sort of accommodate for that demand and the lessened supply.
Well, anyway, I'm not saying that your mind can't make sense of it. I'm just saying that I think it's confusing to think of going from S1 to S3 as being a movement upward and then wrap my mind around that up means decrease. So maybe it's clearer for you, but I'll ask somebody else. Um, let's see. How about Casey Novello? You there, Casey?
Hi.
Hi. Did you get what I was saying? Like,
To be honest, like I am not really strong with economics. I have taken this class twice and I still am lost.
okay, well then maybe you're the person that we should talk to. So a decrease in supply is a leftward shift, but all I was trying to say is that you want to think of it as a leftward shift because, um, you know, if you think of supply as shifting up and that being a decrease, that just seems like it's hard to understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. Well, anyway, before we spend too much time on this, I just wanted to point out to you guys that there's a good reason for thinking of leftward shifts as being decreases and rightward shifts for being increases, because if you think about the shifts as being up and down, it will be confusing. So you should write it down someplace, or you know, um, find some way of remembering that a decrease in demand or supply is always going to be a leftward shift on the graph, and an increase in demand or supply is always going to be a rightward shift on the graph. If you think of it as being up and down, then I guarantee you're almost certainly going to run into some confusion. So, okay, what can shift the supply? Well, this is a quick summary. Remember, a change in the price of the good just represents a movement along the supply curve. For input prices, that will cause a shift in the supply curve, but we didn't really talk about it. So I will now a little bit. So if input prices increase, that's going to cause a leftward shift in the supply curve. So for example, for ice cream, if milk got more expensive, which they make ice cream out of milk and cream, right? Then sellers would want to sell less of it. It's more expensive for them. And expectations has to do with what do they think the price is going to be like in the future. So a lot of times what happens with suppliers, if they think that the price is going to increase tomorrow, they'll decrease their supply today so they can save some inventory for tomorrow. Likewise, if they have expectations that the price is going to fall tomorrow, they try to increase their supply today, push as much of it out of the door to avoid that fall in the price in the future. We talked about the number of sellers. The one we didn't talk about, though, was technology. And I want to tell you, and this will kind of be my last comment for today, that when we talk about technology, it's important to differentiate between cost-saving technological change, that's cost-saving technological change, and innovation. So innovation is just doing something in a different way that doesn't necessarily affect its cost. A lot of times it does. But if you think about, for example, listening to music on vinyl records or CDs or an MP3 or an MP4 that you're listening to, right? That's a different way of delivering the same thing, music, right? And each one of those things represents an innovation, a different way of doing it. But it's not clear that moving from vinyl records to CDs necessarily decreased the cost of distributing music. I'm not saying it didn't. I'm just saying it's not obvious. And for that reason, we wouldn't talk about that type of technological progress in economics, at least not here, right? Here, what we mean is that if firms do something to improve the way that they're doing their business to decrease their costs. And so I'll give you guys a really handy example. And that it has to do with innovations that took place, and these are changes in processes at a big manufacturer you guys might have heard of called 3M. So 3M produces lots of plastics and adhesives and things like that. But they found a way and there's a lot of heat that's used to boil and mix the chemicals and refine them that they use in adhesives and plastics. But they found a way to capture waste heat, which means that they didn't have to use as much natural gas and electricity as they were using before they used this waste heat capture technology. And that actually decreased their costs because they had to spend less on heating fuel in their process. Well, that is a cost-saving technological innovation. It decreases the cost of producing the good, and you might refer to that as technological progress, and that's fine. Technological progress of the cost-saving nature tends to increase supply. Cost-saving technological change will shift the supply curve to the right. Now, innovation in and of itself, it's not clear. So, increase in technology of the cost-saving variety will shift the supply curve to the right. That's what you got to know. Okay, next time we get together, we will talk about putting demand and supply together and defining equilibrium and moving on. So that's all I have for you guys today.